You think you know Pinocchio? Think again. Behind Disney's When You Wish Upon a Star lies a story much darker than you remember. The original Pinocchio? He actually kills the cricket with a hammer long before Jiminy Cricket became the voice of conscience. And that terrifying whale? It wasn't a whale at all, it was a giant shark, so huge a train could fit in its mouth. Even darker, there was a deleted scene where Geppetto and Figaro almost ate their pet fish Cleo out of starvation. And believe it or not, Pinocchio himself wasn't even likable in the beginning. He was a selfish, bratty puppet, until Disney decided to give him a heart. Comment the weirdest Pinocchio fact you know. Let's see if Disney's secrets match yours. 1. Pinocchio kills the cricket. Pinocchio actually had no intention of actually killing the cricket. When the cricket first appears in the kitchen and tries to give him wise advice, Pinocchio gets angry and throws a hammer at it, killing it in the process. However, the cricket returns several times and keeps trying to give Pinocchio advice, which he does not listen to at least until the end, when he becomes good. Things originally got dark during the whale scene. When Geppetto and the cat Figaro are out on the water, they originally got so hungry they considered eating their pet fish, Cleo. There was a whole extended piece of business about that. It got as far as animation, says Kaufman. Ultimately, Disney cut it. In the finished film, you hear a bit of talk about them starving, and immediately the other story elements come in. For a while there, Figaro was kind of stalking the fishbowl, says Kaufman. The saved animation ended up being used for the short Figaro and Cleo. The sea monster is not a whale. In the original story, the sea monster is not a whale as we know it from the Disney cartoon, but a giant shark that is taller than a 5-story house and in whose mouth fits a train. The decision to change the monster from a shark into a whale was influenced by Moby Dick, which is very present in the collective imagination. Also, Disney made the monster scene particularly dramatic, which is not the case in the book. Pinocchio was originally unlikable. Carney explains how much the story's protagonist shifted from conceptualization. In the original story, Pinocchio really isn't a nice character. He's a bit of a brat, and he doesn't listen to anybody, he says. They started down that road and realized it wasn't working. They even began production. It just wasn't working. This character was not appealing. Making Pinocchio more innocent and endearing allowed the audience to better engage and root for him, according to Carney. How Pinocchio won Disney 2 Oscars. Both involved the movie's spectacular music. Paul Smith, Lee Harline, and Ned Washington won the Oscar for Best Original Score. Harline and Washington won Best Song for When You Wish Upon a Star. The latter, of course, has become a theme song for the Disney company over the years. The classic film actually lost money. At first, Pinocchio was the first Disney film to lose money. It's done pretty well since, Kaufman says while laughing. But at the time, because it didn't initially amount to the success of Snow White, it affected Disney's next project, the economical Dumbo. One is so lavish and one is deliberately made on a smaller scale, but they're both great films. They both play to their strengths, he says. Who would have thought? How famous actors brought puppets to life. Nowadays, almost all animated movies, especially Pixar films, are voiced by some incredible actors. But Pinocchio was ahead of its time when the cast was revealed to feature names like Dickie Jones, Cliff Edwards, and of course, Christian Rubb. The latter not only voiced the character of Geppetto, but was also said to be the inspiration behind his appearance. When real actors became cartoons. In order to perfect human-like movements for the animation, the filmmakers used stage actors to move about and act as the iconic characters. Afterward, using the rotoscoping technique to trace over frames of the movement, the animation of characters like Jiminy was made to look human-like and, quite frankly, pretty phenomenal. Human or puppet? Disney's toughest design dilemma. They were unsure whether to draw him with human movements or with wooden movements. Animators struggled for 18 months, until animation director Milt Kahl, one of Disney's 9 old men, decided to blend the two ideas, giving Pinocchio human-like motions, but adding puppet-like joints and screws to the mix. Animators built real clocks to get Disney's approval. The scene above in Geppetto's workshop features clocks, which were actually built into working models in real life by some of the animators, according to Kaufman. They did it partly because Walt would look at some of the designs and say, "Oh, that would never work." They would build a working model to prove to him that it would, he says. The wave effects took massive amounts of strategy. Kaufman explains how much simultaneously went into the last scene of the film when Pinocchio goes underwater. To animate the water, Kaufman says black, the negative, was exposed to represent the light patterns you'd see on the floor of the ocean. Then, for the waves, blue construction paper and shading was done individually for each frame, he explains. There's also a multi-plane effect, so he guesses about 6 animators worked on that scene alone, which is on screen for just over 4 seconds. Artwork was being created for 5 years. According to ARL Managing Director Mary Walsh, Pinocchio was in progress years before the film's 1940 release. "When you see the film, it looks like anything but a rush job," says Kaufman. And the animation process took hundreds of artists. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 or 800 artists altogether at the studio at that time, he says. Jiminy Cricket wasn't always the narrator. In fact, deciding to make Jiminy the narrator later in the movie-making process majorly shifted the story around. When that happened, they had so much more new material that they had to cut some things, says Kaufman. They could have made 3 or 4 films with all of that story material. A song about bad behavior was cut from the film. When the children are traveling off to Pleasure Island, they originally sung 3 Cheers for Anything, which ended up being cut from the final film. Carney says it's about all the rotten things they're gonna do, swiping a pie or telling a lie. He says it ended up being cut because it just took too long to get to their destination. "Let's get to Pleasure Island already," he says. Pleasure Island had a different name. According to Carney, Pleasure Island was once known as Bogeyland, comparable to Sillyland. He explains the original thought process, saying, "They were thinking, what would this place be like? A place all the kids could do things they weren't allowed to do elsewhere." Carney also sheds light on some of the darker themes in Pleasure Island, like when the kids become donkeys. And just when you think you've heard it all, think again, because the story of Pinocchio still hides a few secrets Disney never meant for you to find. Let's dive into the bonus facts. The cat Walt Disney couldn't let go. Though Figaro is a relatively minor character in the movie, Walt loved the cat so much that he found another role for him when Pinocchio was over, Minnie Mouse's pet. Minnie already had a pet Cocker Spaniel, but it was ousted in favor of Figaro. Geppetto is a very poor man. At the beginning of the story, Geppetto goes to a friend, the carpenter Mastro Ciliegia, to ask him for a piece of wood for a puppet. With the puppet, he wants to travel the world and earn money because he is very poor. To get Pinocchio a book for school, he sells his only jacket and stays in his shirt, even though it is winter and snowing. Later, when the puppeteer Stromboli asks Pinocchio what his father does for a living, Pinocchio replies, "The poor man." 1,000 adventures. Pinocchio really has countless adventures. He follows the cat and the fox to the Field of Miracles, where he thinks he can sow a money plant, but is almost killed, ends up in prison, is chained to a doghouse and has to work as a guard dog, flies on a pigeon, ends up in Playland where he turns into a donkey, ends up in the belly of the shark to save his father, and much more. Not for nothing is the original title The Adventures of Pinocchio. From a wooden boy who killed a cricket, to the hand-drawn masterpiece that nearly bankrupted Disney, the making of Pinocchio was as fragile and fearless as the puppet himself. Every frame, every shadow, every wish upon a star was carved by hundreds of artists who turned a dark Italian fable into one of the most hauntingly beautiful films ever made. Because behind that innocent smile, Pinocchio was never just about lies. It was about what it takes to become real. Subscribe if you love uncovering the strange side of Disney. And comment which fact shocked you the most. Your truth might just be the next story we tell.